Let's talk about Indiana, because in
Sure.
stalking you online and checking out some of your previous interviews to prepare for this, I saw that you have been in the same house in Broad Ripple since like 1968.
1969.
1969.
Yep.
So you are a Hoosier. You are here by choice.
Yep.
What is it that's kept you here? What is it that you like about Indiana specifically?
Well, it's home. You know, I mean, it is my home. I grew up in Hammond, Indiana, up near Chicago. Went to college in Bloomington. Met my husband the first day that I was there as a freshman, which is pretty amusing. And
that's serendipitous.
I know, how weird, huh? We're still married too. But so we came to Indianapolis in 1968 when he graduated, and we have been in that little house in Broad Ripple since 1969. I love the neighborhood. It's a diverse neighborhood. We have a little pocket park across the street from our house, so we get to see all the little kids in the neighborhood. And my kids played there. My grandkids played there. And now we have neighbor kids that are playing there. So I love that. You know, in the summertime, they bring school buses of kids who are in daycare. And it sounds like the beach. You know, you go over there, it smells like Coppertone. It's really cool. I think Indianapolis is a good city to be in. It's a navigable city. I mean, it's a conservative state, but in my life, I don't see those people. And I think we know of whom I talk. Some people, for example, like our vice president, I don't see those kinds of people in my life, right? I see writers and painters, and the Writer Center recently moved to the Circle Center industrial complex near Mass Ave in Indianapolis. And there are like dozens of artists who have galleries here. And so there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on. And so my life in Indiana as a writer is wonderful. I love it. I mean, I love to be able to leave Indiana too. I teach every summer in Assisi in Italy with Art Workshop International. So I'll plug that for a minute and just say, it's a fabulous program. It's a 2-week program in Assisi in a small family hotel, very cozy, very friendly program. I'll be there again next summer. So if you're interested, I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful program, and you can go to Art Workshop International and find it. So I do that. I like to travel. Love to go to New York when I can. But when I go to New York, I'm always ready to come home. You know, I like it here. I have a little red convertible and I can put the top down, and I can drive wherever I want. I can't do that in New York.
Well, that activity is nice, but you miss life here among the corn.
Yeah. I like my life here. My family's here too. Both my daughters are here. My sister's here. My nephews are all here. So it's good. And
I wanted to ask you, because not only have you lived here since 1969, and I should mention my wife and I, our first home was in Broad Ripple.
Oh, yeah.
I was born in Hammond, so we're
I did not know that. What high school did you go to?
Well, I went to Lebanon High School. My dad worked for the Chicago Tribune for a number of years, and so we lived in a town called Valparaiso, which is right next door to Hammond. And Hammond had the better hospital at the time I was born. And then my dad got a job for the Indianapolis Star and moved us this way. And we've been here in the Indiana surrounding areas. So, but I wanted to ask you, because so much of your fiction and my fiction as well is set in Indiana, which is sort of amusing, because you'd think that having lived here in this nice, calm place, wanting to write something more exciting, we'd write about more exciting places, but you're writing predominantly about Indiana. What is it that keeps you coming back to Indiana as a subject for fiction?
Well, for one thing, it's what I know. You know, it's familiar to me, and I like that. I have part of my book, An American Tune, is set in northern Michigan, which is an area that I love and I spend some time in. And I have a book that's set in England, and I have a book that's set in Holland. But for the most part, yeah, they're here in Indiana. I don't know. I don't find life to be any less interesting here than it is anywhere else. You know, we all have the same kinds of problems as human beings. We all laugh, we all cry, we all grieve, we all make mistakes and screw up and have to sort it out. And so, you know, I'm writing about the kind of people that I know and that I love. And so I don't necessarily feel like I need to go afield to you know, for a setting.
Makes sense to me.
There you go.
In my case, particularly since I'm writing about such fantastical things as zombies and haunted houses and the rest, if I know the setting, if that's real, then maybe I can focus all my lives on the zombies and the haunted house and all the rest of it.
That's right.
And since we're talking about Indiana writers, I would feel that we had missed something terrible if we didn't at least bring up Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut, one of my favorite authors. I know that if you read Barbara Shoup's interview at middlegradeninja.com, your choice for author that you would most like to have lunch with, living or dead, is Kurt Vonnegut. And one thing I love about Kurt Vonnegut is he is painted on the side of a building here.
I know, how cool
so
is
amazing. That? You walk around and like there's something painted on the building. It's not a football player. It's not a basketball player.
It's Kurt Vonnegut. And Maury Evans too, the poet, is there, which is cool.
So preach to the choir. Tell me what it is you love about Kurt Vonnegut and his writing, and what you think that it is about him that speaks to Hoosiers.
Well, I think he speaks to everyone, and I'm not sure he speaks to Hoosiers because he's sort of a renegade. But I think he speaks to smart Hoosiers. You know, people who understand the paradox of life and the complexity of life, and have a strong sense of irony, because that was Kurt Vonnegut. I just think he's hilarious. I love his mind. I love the way his mind takes off in these areas that I mean, I could not even imagine, you know, where he goes. But then when he's writing these things that are totally off the wall, he just says the most amazing down to earth things. One of my favorite quotes of him, I know I won't be able to say it all, but it's the one about babies. Do you remember that one? And he says, "Hello,
got to be kind, babies.
Welcome to Earth." And he sort of says, and it, you know, gives a little description. And then at the end, he says, "The one thing you got to know, babies, God damn it, you've got to be kind." And even as I say that, I get that cold feeling on my head, you know, because it's the absolute truth. And that's one reason why I love him too. He always tells the truth. He'll tell it in some sort of wacko way, but you know, it just boondoggles you when you read it, because he'll be dancing around something and then all of a sudden there's this big real thing that is so true and so shocking in its trueness, and he had the courage to do that. I think that's amazing. You know, when I was younger, I didn't like him because I thought that he was too cynical, and I thought that he, you know, sort of made fun of Indiana and whatever. But then as I read him more, especially when I went back and read Slaughterhouse-Five after he died, and I realized I hadn't even gotten it the first time. You know, it's just a book about time, and it's so deep and it's so amazing. And then, you know, Dan Wakefield, who is also an Indiana writer and who was a good friend of Vonnegut's, edited the letters, Vonnegut's letters. Have you read those yet? Because I
haven't read the letters. I have heard Dan Wakefield speak about the letters.
Yeah, and the thing that it's a huge fat book, and I mean, you know, I can't put books down, but I really, and I just love this book, and I just, from the letters, you could see what a kind person he was and how frustrated he got with the world, you know, and all the things that he did. He was a very generous writer to other writers. He was a good person. He adopted his, when his sister, I think his sister and brother-in-law died in a car crash or something. And he ended up adopting those 3 children and raising them as his own. But he was, you know, as he got older, like we all do, he got crabbier. and it was, you know, I think harder for him to be patient. But I'll say only one thing more about Kurt Vonnegut. But years ago, he was at Butler, and I went to hear him, and he was doing a Q&A at Butler in one of the classrooms. And it was when you could still smoke, you know, in classrooms, and he was smoking, and he was a chain smoker and putting out his cigarettes in the chalk tray, which I thought was hilarious. And then some kid said to him, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, "Mr. Vonnegut, now that you've been doing this for so long and you're such a popular writer, sort of like, I guess you know what you're doing. Could you just tell us how you do it?" And he looked at the kid, he took a long drag off of his cigarette, and he said, "If I knew how the book was going to turn out, why would I write it?" And I I just like sat up in my seat and I thought, oh my God, that's how I thought I was doing it wrong because I felt that way. You know, I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. And so it was a great moment for me because it really changed my perception of what it was. I mean, when I was a kid, I thought what it really meant was that if you were a writer, if you had the talent to be a writer, it just meant that you naturally had all these stories in your head and all you really needed was a typewriter and be able to type fast so they could. I mean, I really did. I really thought that's what it was all about. I didn't know anything else. And then I began to really think about it. I had started writing then, and I was feeling like a failure because I didn't know what I was doing. And then I began to realize finally that really your imagination is no more than the ability to ask what if. That's all it is. You say, what if, what if, what if? That's what you do when you get stuck. What if, what if? And you can do that forever. And sometimes you go back to the thing you thought of first, but sometimes you don't. So that was a great moment for me. I never got to know him. My friend Susan Neville knew him really well, and he would call her up in the middle of the night sometimes and be worried about something. He was kind of sweet that way.
I was just thinking if I could have the opportunity to chat with Kurt Vonnegut, he could smoke in whatever room
I
we
know,
were in.
me
It's fine.
too. You can do whatever you want.
It's my bed. You go ahead. Put the ashtray
Totally.
right on my pillow. It's fine, Mr. Vonnegut. I saw him speak over at IUPUI before I had read any of his novels, and it's one of my great regrets in life because I was excited to hear a writer. But then I went and I've read with the Kurt Vonnegut guys. I should plug them real fast. There's a podcast. It's already concluded, so all the content is out there waiting for you. But the Kurt Vonnegut guys was the name of the podcast, and they went through and they did a weekly show or a monthly show on every one of Kurt Vonnegut's novels. So I read every one of his novels along with them.
Great.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
But I remember I had an issue with him when I was younger because I read Mother Night and I really felt like he didn't make the most of what an outstanding premise that novel had, and that he was more concerned with theme and what he wanted to say about human nature, where I was like, well, you could have done another 100 pages of just running around in chases, and we have great Nazi spy that's also an American. What a wonderful opportunity. But that's just not the kind of writer he was. And then I read, what was it? Breakfast of Champions. And I was just on my back, depressed for a weekend. And my wife kept saying, well, what's wrong? I'm like, Vonnegut, Breakfast of Champions. Oh, I'm not reading that book for sure. That will take your weekend away from me. But then I read God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater.
That's
and that perked me up and
that's
got me all full of rage. Yeah, that's the babies.
Yeah.
Got a quote.
I do love Slaughterhouse-Five. And I love, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one about the abstract impressionist painter who's famous because he used cheap paint and all of the paint fell off of his paintings.
The two people in love on the beach. What is the name of that?
Isn't it Bluebeard?
So, yes, it is. It is.
Yeah,
it's Bluebeard.
Bluebeard. I love that painting. But, you know, there's also, for those who don't know, the Kurt Vonnegut Memorial Library here in Indianapolis, which is a very cool organization and an actual place where you can go and talk to people who are really into Vonnegut, and they have his typewriter and some other kinds of cool things. So it's downtown.